I want a baby so badly. She sobbed into my chest the moment I walked through the door. My name is Gabriel. I'm 32 years old, been a Marine for 10 years, and just finished 6 months in Iraq. In 8 years of marriage, Jennifer had always been crystal clear about kids. Not happening, she'd say whenever the subject came up. I'm not ready for that kind of responsibility. But here she was, clinging to me like her life depended on it, begging for something she'd never wanted before. I held her close and let her cry. The house smelled different. Not bad, just different. New air freshener maybe. The furniture had been rearranged. Small things, but I noticed them. You learn to notice details when your life depends on it. Of course, sweetheart, I whispered into her hair. But first let me show you something. She pulled back and looked at me with those green eyes I'd fallen in love with in college. They were puffy from crying. But there was something else there, something I couldn't quite place. Fear maybe, or guilt. Show me what, she asked. Later, I said. Let me get cleaned up first. 6 months of desert dust doesn't wash off easy. She nodded and stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. That's when I noticed it. The slight curve to her belly that hadn't been there when I left. Just barely visible under her loose sweater. But I'd memorized every inch of my wife's body over 8 years. She was pregnant, had to be at least 3 months along, judging by the subtle changes. Have you been eating well? Asked, keeping my voice casual. Too well, she laughed, but it sounded forced. Stress eating while you were gone. I missed you so much. I smiled and kissed her forehead. I missed you too. But I hadn't missed her calls. Every conversation we'd had over video chat, she'd seemed distracted. Always checking her phone, always cutting our talk short because she had somewhere to be. When I'd ask about her job at the insurance office, she'd give vague answers. When I'd ask about her coworkers, she'd change the subject. The anonymous email had arrived in my military account 3 weeks before I was scheduled to come home. No sender name, just a short message. Your wife isn't eating alone. Attached was a photo of Jennifer walking into a hotel with a man I didn't recognize. Dark hair, expensive suit, wedding ring on his finger. I'd thought about ignoring it, thought about deleting it and pretending I'd never seen it. But something about Jennifer's recent behavior made me save it instead. Now standing in my own living room, watching my wife lie to my face about stress eating, I was glad I'd made the calls I'd made. Jennifer and I met at University of Kansas when I was 21 and she was 19. She was studying business administration. I was in ROC. She used to joke that she was attracted to men in uniform, but only if they promised never to make her a military wife who moved around every 2 years. I promised and I kept that promise. 10 years in the Marines and we'd never left Kansas City, Missouri. She got her job at Caldwell Insurance straight out of college. Started as a clerk, worked her way up to claims adjuster. Good money, good benefits, and she loved the stability. I loved that. She loved it. When I deployed to Afghanistan 3 years ago, she handled everything at home without complaint. When I got orders for Iraq this time, she'd kissed me goodbye and told me she'd be waiting. For the first 3 months she was. Our video calls were regular. Her emails were long and detailed. She'd tell me about her days, about her coworkers, about the new supervisor who'd transferred from the Chicago office. David Patterson, his name was married guy with 2 kids, she'd mentioned seemed nice enough. By month 4 things started to change. She'd be tired during our calls. She'd started going out more with coworkers. Just the girls, she'd say. You know how it is. We need to blow off steam after dealing with insurance claims all day. I didn't think much of it at first. Jennifer had always been social, and I wanted her to have friends while I was gone, but then the calls started getting shorter, the emails less frequent. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me 1-sentence answers. When I'd ask about David Patterson and how the new supervision was working out, she'd get uncomfortable. He's fine, she'd say. Professional, does his job. But her voice would change when she said it. Higher pitched, the way it got when she was nervous. The photo in that anonymous email showed them holding hands as they walked into the Marriott downtown. Jennifer was wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. The timestamp showed it was taken on a Tuesday afternoon during work hours. After I got that email, I'd started paying closer attention during our video calls. Jennifer's hair was different. She'd lost weight in her face, but gained it in her chest. She was wearing makeup during calls she'd never worn makeup for before. Small things, but they added up. The private investigator I hired charged me $800 for 3 weeks of surveillance. He was thorough. Followed her to lunch meetings that lasted 3 hours. Documented hotel visits that happened twice a week. Got photos of her leaving David Patterson's apartment complex on Saturday mornings. The pregnancy test receipt from CVS Pharmacy was dated 4 weeks before I was scheduled to come home. Right around the time she'd started talking about missing me more than usual. The envelope was waiting for me in my truck when I went out to get my gear. The private investigator had left it under my windshield wiper just like we'd arranged. Inside were photographs, bank records, medical records obtained through legal channels, and a timeline that laid out 4 months of deception. I sat in my driveway and went through it all. Jennifer entering the Marriott with David Patterson on 14 separate occasions. Jennifer leaving his apartment building on Saturday mornings while his wife was at yoga class with the kids. Jennifer at a downtown clinic for prenatal appointments she'd never mentioned to me. The medical records were the hardest part. Pregnancy confirmed at 12 weeks. Blood work showing she was healthy. Ultrasound images of a baby that had been conceived while I was sleeping in a tent in Iraq, eating meals from plastic packages and trying not to think about roadside bombs. David Patterson was 41 years old. He had a wife named Catherine and 2 daughters, ages 8 and 11. He lived in a house worth $400,000 in Johnson County. He drove a BMW and wore expensive suits and had never served a day in his life protecting anything more dangerous than insurance claims. I put the photos back in the envelope and looked at my house. Jennifer was probably inside right now planning how she was going to convince me that her pregnancy was a miracle timing. That somehow in the 2 weeks I'd been home on leave 6 months ago, we'd conceived a child she'd suddenly decided she wanted desperately. The thing that bothered me most wasn't even the cheating. It was how calculated it all was. She'd waited until I was deployed to start the affair. She'd waited until she was pregnant to end it. And now she was waiting for me to come home so she could trick me into raising another man's child. I'd spent 6 months in a combat zone, worrying about her, missing her, counting down the days until I could hold her again. While I was dodging rocket attacks and thinking about our future together, she was building a future with someone else. But Jennifer had made one mistake. She'd assumed I was the same trusting kid who'd married her 8 years ago. She'd assumed that 6 months in Iraq hadn't changed me. She'd assumed I wouldn't be smart enough to notice the holes in her story. I folded the envelope and put it in my jacket pocket. Then I went back inside to face my wife. She was in the kitchen making dinner. She'd changed clothes, put on something that showed off her figure. She was trying to seduce me into believing her lie. "How was your truck?" she asked without turning around. "Fine," I said. "Just getting my things settled." She nodded and stirred whatever she was cooking. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. I watched her for a moment, memorizing this scene. In 20 minutes, everything was going to change. "Jennifer," I said quietly. "Yes, we need to talk." Jennifer turned around slowly, the wooden spoon still in her hand. Her face had gone pale. "Talk about what?" she asked. I pulled out one of the kitchen chairs and sat down. "About your pregnancy." Her eyes widened. "How did you? I was going to tell you. I just found out myself." "When did you find out?" "Yesterday," she said quickly. "I took a test yesterday morning. I was going to surprise you with dinner and then tell you the news." I nodded like I believed her. "That's wonderful timing. How far along do you think you are?" "I don't know yet. Maybe a few weeks from when you were home on leave." "February," I said. "I was home for 2 weeks in February." "By February." She was gripping the spoon so tightly her knuckles were white. "Must have happened then." I stood up and walked over to her. She flinched when I put my hands on her shoulders, but she didn't pull away. "Jennifer," I said gently, "I need you to be honest with me." "I am being honest." "Are you sure?" Because I've been thinking about the timeline and something doesn't add up. Her breathing got faster. What do you mean? Well, if you conceived in February, you'd be about 4.5 months along, but you look more like you're 3 months, maybe 3.5. I don't know what you're talking about. I just found out yesterday. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out one of the photographs. It showed her walking out of the women's health clinic downtown, dated 3 weeks ago. She was clearly showing in the photo wearing maternity clothes. Jennifer stared at the picture for a long time. When she looked up at me, there were tears in her eyes. Gabriel, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, let me show you something else. I pulled out another photo. This one showed her holding hands with David Patterson as they walked into the Marriott. Jennifer's mouth fell open. Where did you get these? Someone sent me an email while I was deployed. Anonymous. Just a photo and a message that said my wife wasn't eating alone. Gabriel, please. It's not what you think. What is it then? She set the spoon down on the counter and wrapped her arms around herself. David and we became friends while you were gone. He was going through problems with his wife. I was lonely. We started having lunch together and it grew into something more. But it's over now. It's been over for weeks. When I found out I was pregnant, I ended it. I realized what I really wanted was a family with you. I pulled out the medical records. According to this, you're 14 weeks pregnant. That puts conception sometime in late May. I left for Iraq in April. Jennifer stared at the papers in my hands. Her face went from pale to gray. I hired a private investigator, I said. He's very thorough. Gabriel, please. I know how this looks. But how it looks is that you've been having an affair with your married supervisor for 4 months while I was serving my country. How it looks is that you got pregnant with his baby. And now you're trying to trick me into thinking it's mine. She started crying then, real tears, not the manipulative ones from earlier. I never meant for this to happen, but it did happen. And instead of being honest with me, you decided to lie. 'Cause I love you. 'Cause I want this to work. You love me, but you've been sleeping with another man for 4 months. It was a mistake. Terrible mistake. But the baby isn't mine. She flinched like I'd slapped her. You don't know that. I pulled out the timeline the investigator had prepared. Hotel receipts, apartment building security footage, credit card records showing meals for 2 at romantic restaurants. Actually, I do know that because you've been with David Patterson at least twice a week since I deployed. Because the conception date lines up perfectly with when you started staying out late on weeknights because you've been lying to me for months. Jennifer sank into a chair and put her head in her hands. What are you going to do? That depends on you. Jennifer looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. What do you mean? I mean, you have a choice to make. You can keep lying to me. Or you can tell me the truth about everything. I told you the truth. I had an affair. I'm pregnant. I ended it because I realized I made a mistake. When did you end it? 3 weeks ago. I pulled out another photograph. This one was taken 2 days ago while I was still in Iraq. It showed Jennifer and David Patterson leaving his apartment building together. She was wearing the same maternity top she'd worn to greet me at the door. Try again, I said. Her shoulders sagged. Babe, I didn't end it 3 weeks ago. When did you end it? Yesterday. When I found out you were coming home. So, you've been with him this entire time. And the baby is his. She nodded without looking at me. Does he know? What does he plan to do about it? Jennifer started crying again. Nothing. He said he can't leave his wife and kids. He said I was on my own. I sat down across from her. So your plan was to come home, seduce me, and trick me into thinking the baby was mine. I didn't know what else to do. I'm 3 months pregnant with nowhere to go. David made it clear he wasn't going to help me. Panic. How long have you been planning this since I found out I was pregnant? But Gabriel, I swear part of me really does want this to work. Part of me really does love you. Which part? What? Which part of you loves me? The part that's been lying to me for 4 months. The part that's been sleeping with another man while I was getting shot at in Iraq. The part that was planning to trick me into raising his child. She didn't answer. I pulled out the bank records. Your credit card shows charges at Victoria's Secret expensive restaurants, hotels. You've been spending money we don't have on your affair. I'll pay it back with what your salary. Move. Been taking half days off work to meet David. According to the investigator, your supervisor at Caldwin Insurance has been asking questions about your attendance. Jennifer's face went white. How does he know that? He's thorough. He talked to your coworkers. Apparently, you and David haven't been as discreet as you thought. Everyone in your office knows about the affair. That's not true. Susan Phillips in accounting told him she'd seen you leaving hotels together. Janet Morrison in claims processing said you'd been acting strange for months. Even the security guard in your building noticed you were staying late with David after everyone else went home. Jennifer put her hands over her face. Oh God, it gets worse. David's wife knows too. Her head snapped up. What? Catherine Patterson. She's known for 2 months. She hired her own private investigator. You're lying. I pulled out a letter from my jacket pocket. She wrote you this. She asked my investigator to give it to you when the time was right. Jennifer took the letter with shaking hands. As she read it, her face went from white to green. When she finished, she dropped the letter on the table. She's filing for divorce, Jennifer whispered. And she's naming you as the other woman. She's going after David for everything he's worth. His house, his retirement, his savings. She's also going to make sure your affair becomes public record in the divorce proceedings. This can't be happening. It is happening and it's about to get worse. What do you mean? I pulled out the final document from the envelope. I've already filed for divorce. Jennifer stared at the divorce papers like they were written in a foreign language. When 2 weeks ago from Iraq, my lawyer filed them while I was still deployed. You can't do this. Already did. And according to Missouri law, adultery affects property division. Since you've been using marital funds to support your affair, and since you've been lying about paternity, I'm entitled to most of our assets. She looked around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. This is my home too. Actually, it's not. The house is in my name only. I bought it before we got married, and we never added you to the deed. You have no legal claim to it. The furniture, my clothes. You can take your personal belongings. Everything else stays. Jennifer stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. This isn't fair. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. You threw yourself out when you decided to have an affair while I was serving my country. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. She started pacing around the kitchen. David will help me once he sees these papers. Once he realizes his wife is leaving him anyway. He'll want to be with me. David Patterson resigned from Caldwin Insurance this morning. She stopped pacing. What? He cleaned out his office at 6 a.m. before anyone else got to work. Left a resignation letter on his supervisor's desk. According to my investigator, he's moving back to Chicago to stay with his brother. You're lying. I pulled out my phone and showed her a text message from the investigator. It was time-stamped 3 hours ago and included a photo of David loading boxes into a moving truck. He's gone, Jennifer. He left without telling you. She grabbed my phone and stared at the photo. He wouldn't just leave. He already did. His apartment is empty. His cell phone has been disconnected. He's not coming back. Jennifer sank back into her chair. I don't understand. He said he loved me. He lied. But the baby is not his problem anymore. He made that clear when he ran away instead of facing the consequences. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally looked at me, there was something desperate in her eyes. Gabriel, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't leave me with nothing. You didn't leave me with nothing when you decided to cheat on me. I was lonely. You were gone for 6 months. I was gone serving my country. While I was risking my life, you were risking our marriage. It meant nothing. It meant everything. It meant our marriage vows meant nothing to you. It meant my service meant nothing to you. It meant I meant nothing to you. She started crying again. That's not true. Then why did you do it? I don't know. I was scared and lonely, and David was there, and he made me feel special. And now I realize I made the biggest mistake of my life. I stood up and walked over to the stove. The dinner she'd been making was burning. I turned off the heat and moved the pan. "The divorce will be final in 60 days, I said. "You have until tomorrow to pack your things and find somewhere to stay. Gabriel, please. The locks will be changed tomorrow evening." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "One more thing, I'm keeping the photos in the medical records. If you try to claim the baby is mine for any legal purposes, I'll produce them in court." She didn't say anything. She just sat there crying. I went upstairs to pack a bag. I'd stay at a hotel tonight. Let her have one last night in the house to figure out her next move. It was more kindness than she deserved, but I'd always been too decent for my own good. That was about to change. 2 months later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office when Jennifer's attorney called. She wanted to contest the divorce terms. She was claiming the baby might be mine after all, demanding a paternity test, asking for spousal support and part of my military benefits. "Tell her no," I said. "She's prepared to take this to court," my lawyer warned. Let's go to court." The hearing was set for the following Tuesday. Jennifer showed up 5 months pregnant, wearing a conservative dress and looking like the picture of an abandoned military wife. Her lawyer had coached her well, but I'd been preparing for this moment since the day I discovered her affair. When the judge asked for evidence regarding paternity, I presented the complete investigative file. The photographs, the medical records, the timeline showing conception occurred while I was deployed. Jennifer's face went white as her lawyer reviewed the documents. "Your Honor," her attorney said, "my client admits to having an affair, but the timing is very clear." My lawyer interrupted. "The defendant conceived this child while Sergeant Rodriguez was serving in Iraq. Furthermore, we have evidence that she attempted to deceive him about paternity upon his return." The judge reviewed the medical records. "Mr. Rodriguez, you were deployed from April through October." "Yes, Your Honor." "And according to these medical records, conception occurred in late May." "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at Jennifer. "Miss Rodriguez, do you dispute these dates?" Jennifer's lawyer whispered something to her. She shook her head. "The court finds no biological relationship between Sergeant Rodriguez and the child in question," the judge announced. "The divorce will be granted as filed with no spousal support or shared custody arrangements." Jennifer started crying. Her lawyer gathered his papers and stood up. "Your Honor," he said, "my client will need time to arrange alternative housing. The defendant has had 60 days to arrange alternative housing." The judge replied, "This matter is closed." As we walked out of the courtroom, Jennifer grabbed my arm. "Gabriel, please. I have nowhere to go." I gently removed her hand. "You should have thought about that before you decided to throw away 8 years of marriage for a man who ran away the moment things got complicated." She stood there in the hallway, 5 months pregnant and completely alone. Part of me felt sorry for her, but mostly I felt relieved. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I heard through mutual friends that Jennifer had moved back in with her parents in rural Nebraska. Her father was a farmer who'd never approved of her city life anyway. She was working at a small-town insurance office for half the salary she'd made in Kansas City, trying to save money for when the baby arrived. David Patterson's divorce had been even messier than ours. His wife had taken him for everything he was worth. He'd lost his house, his savings, and his right to see his daughters unsupervised. The last I heard, he was working at a small insurance agency in Chicago, living in a studio apartment and sending most of his paycheck to his ex-wife. Jennifer had tried to contact him after the baby was born, but he'd refused to acknowledge paternity or provide any support. She was raising the child alone in her childhood bedroom in a town where everyone knew exactly why she'd come home. As for me, I'd used my military benefits to go back to school. I was studying criminal justice, thinking about a career in law enforcement when my service was up. I'd bought a smaller house outside Kansas City, something that was completely mine. I was dating a woman named Sophia who worked as a nurse at the VA hospital. She understood military life, understood sacrifice, understood loyalty. Sometimes I thought about those 8 years with Jennifer, the good times, the dreams we'd shared, the future we'd planned together. But mostly, I was grateful that her betrayal had shown me who she really was before I'd wasted any more of my life with someone who saw my deployment as an opportunity instead of a sacrifice. I'd learned the difference between people who support those who serve and people who exploit their absence. And that lesson was worth more than the marriage I'd lost. In the months that followed, Jennifer faced the full consequences of her deception. She lost her well-paying job in Kansas City when word of her affair with a supervisor spread throughout the company, forcing her to return to her parents' farm in the middle of Nebraska, where job opportunities were scarce and everyone knew her story. David Patterson abandoned her completely when his own marriage collapsed, leaving her to raise his child alone while he fled to Chicago to rebuild his shattered life. The small farming community where she grew up offered little sympathy for a woman who had betrayed a deployed Marine, making her both financially dependent on her aging parents and socially isolated in a place where military service was deeply respected and adultery was not easily forgiven. My military training had taught me patience and strategic thinking, skills that served me well in protecting myself from someone who had mistaken my absence for opportunity rather than sacrifice.